Welcome to Wawas on Wire. Today we're talking about Liew Chin Tong's assessment of Anwar Ibrahim's monumental task. And honestly, for you, the stakes could not be higher. We are, less than 2 years away from the end of his first term. And the argument being put forward is that winning a second term, well, that's not the finish line, it's just the starting line.
It is a really extraordinary claim. It forces you to look past all the daily political noise and focus on legacy. Core idea is that if the prime minister can pull off his true mission, which is nothing less than reshaping the country's entire political order, he'll be in the same league as our founding fathers. Talking about figures like Tunku Abdul Rahman, Tun Razak, and if he succeeds, his historical standing could even surpass someone like Mahathir Mohamad.
Wow. Okay, that is a fundamental reordering of our political history right there. To say he could surpass Mahathir, we have to be specific. What does this reshaping actually involve? I mean, we're comparing him to the men who built the nation's entire architecture from the ground up.
It really comes down to two things: stability and vision. You have to remember what it was like 3 years ago when he was sworn in back on November 24, 2022. The whole political scene was completely fractured. We had crippling instability, no single coalition with a clear mandate.
It was chaos.
Total chaos. The assessment now is that he's managed to navigate through that. And after some recent events, like the ASEAN summit, public perception is that he looks a lot more stable, more capable, certainly compared to his key competitors. People like Muhyiddin Yassin, Hamza Zainuddin, or Hadia Wang. And that stability, that hard-won stability, is the platform you need to even attempt something generational.
Okay, so stability is the runway. I get that. But let's unpack this core idea of a political order.
Yeah.
It sounds a bit academic, but it's clearly central to this whole thing. For anyone listening, how do we define that? What is it really?
Think of it as the country's operating system. It runs much deeper than just policy or who's in charge right now. It dictates how the country works, long after an administration is gone. Conceptually, there are sort of two ways to look at it. The first one is the set of political institutions that define the state.
Like the courts, parliament.
Exactly. Things that manage the rule of law and wrestle with democratic accountability. The deep structure.
And the second way, the one that people feel more directly.
The second way is how most people experience it. It's that specific mix of ideology, economic policy, and how voters align that becomes so successful, so entrenched, that its influence lasts for decades across multiple elections. It decides who gets what and why.
That definition leads us straight back to the original architects you mentioned. To understand the opportunity now, we have to look at the last time someone really built one of these things.
Precisely. And that brings us to Tun Razak. What's so fascinating is that his time as prime minister was relatively short, but he is arguably the most influential in creating that lasting structure. He set up a political and economic order that shaped the nation for decades.
But, people will immediately ask about Mahathir. He served the longest. He put Malaysia on the map globally, the 80s, the 90s, massive projects, massive growth. Why is his contribution seen as just an adjustment and not a whole new order?
And he was globally renowned, no question about it. He definitely accelerated our economic ambitions.
Yeah.
But the political and economic system he was working within was essentially an inheritance. He modified the foundation that was laid during Tun Razak's era.
So he was building on top of it, not creating a new foundation.
That's a perfect way to put it. Tun Razak established the rules of the game. Foundational ideas like the new economic policy, which completely reshaped economic distribution and how people voted. Mahathir built a skyscraper on that foundation, but he didn't dig new footings. And we also have to remember, Tun Razak didn't do it alone. He had this very capable team around him, people like Tun Ismail, a whole cohort of skilled bureaucrats. That collective ability to push through structural change is what made it stick.
Okay, so if Tun Razak's order was the original, we have to ask, when did we miss the boat on the next big evolution? When did that structure start to get outdated?
The 1990s. That was the critical turning point, without a doubt. By the early 90s, the country was at a point where it needed a fundamental shift. Economically, politically, we were ready for the next level.
Yeah.
There was this fragile window of opportunity to redefine the whole system. Mahathir could have given more space to the progressive forces at the time.
Which were largely represented by Anwar Ibrahim, his then deputy.
Yes. He could have prepared for a smooth generational transition.
But that moment was just squandered, tragically. The old guard, led by Mahathir, they chose to cling to the existing order. And what happened? The new progressive leadership was purged, imprisoned, And let's be really clear, this wasn't just political drama. This had real, devastating economic consequences.
Massive consequences. I mean, we are still dealing with the fallout today. That political failure happened at the exact same time as two huge global economic shocks. First, the 1997 Asian financial crisis, and then, just as devastating, China joining the World Trade Organization in 2001. Because we were in political turmoil, because we lacked the stability to reform and adapt, those shocks just hammered our economy's competitiveness for the next 20 years.
And the result of that stagnation is what people feel every day. It's the constant struggle.
Precisely. That's why international bodies like the World Bank started talking about us being stuck in the middle income trap.
Yeah.
Think about what that actually means for a Malaysian family. A fresh graduate has a degree, but they're fighting to find a job that pays over, say, 5,000 ringgit a month.
It's a reality for so many.
It is. Our businesses end up competing on low wages instead of high technology. And for years, the government was just too unstable, too fractured to push through the tough structural reforms we needed to break that cycle.
Even in 2018, with Pakatan Harapan, there was that brief moment of hope, a chance to finally start those reforms. But that opportunity just vanished into thin air with all the infighting. So the pressure today, with the clock ticking, it's just immense. We can't afford another failed transition.
The urgency is absolutely historical. With less than 2 years left in this term, the goal has to be structural change that outlives this government. It's not just about winning the next election. Of course, securing that second term is non-negotiable for this to happen. That means keeping support from key partners, like Gabungan Party Sarawak,
And a future stable government in Sabah.
the public, and critically, the United Malays National Organization. All those pieces have to hold.
So it's clear the second term is the vehicle, but the destination is this visionary legacy. Let's get into the blueprints then. If this new political order is going to be built, what are the 4 essential pillars?
Okay, the 4 pillars are basically the roadmap out of the middle income trap and towards becoming a truly developed nation. The first one is technology and advancement. This means we have to stop being just a place for cheap assembly.
And become a designer, creator.
Yes, a high-tech component designer and manufacturer. It means pouring money into R&D, digitalizing the government to make it more efficient. It's about being genuinely competitive on a global scale.
That sounds heavily economic. What about fixing the political system itself?
That's pillar number 2, democratic prosperity. This is about making sure our democracy is resilient. It's not just about having elections. It's about a truly independent judiciary, guaranteeing the autonomy of bodies like the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, and pushing through electoral reforms to bring back public trust. It's about building real checks and balances no matter who's in power.
And the third pillar touches on something that has always been a source of tension, the relationship between the states and the federal government.
Absolutely. The third is true federalism. This means we have to move past empty promises and fully recognize the rights and needs of all states, especially Sabah and Sarawak. It's about looking at financial autonomy, how resources are shared, and decentralizing power, so development is driven locally, not just from the top down. The cooperation of Gabungan Party Sarawak really depends on this.
And finally, the fourth pillar, the one that hits everyone's wallet.
Right. Economic strength. This is about creating a powerful, robust middle class where people don't feel like they're being left behind. This is the real answer to the middle income trap. We need to create far more high-paying, high-skilled jobs. We need the ringgit's value to mean something, so inflation isn't just eating away everyone's savings. The whole point is to stabilize more families, give them real wealth and a buffer against all this global instability.
Let me just push back on this a little bit. Is it not a bit naive to think any leader can lay the foundations for all of this in just 2 years? Especially after we just talked about a 30-year history of failed transitions.
And that is the central tension, isn't it? The expectation isn't that the whole thing will be built and finished in 2 years. That's impossible. The expectation is that the foundations have to be laid now. They have to be so deep, so strong, that the next decade of government has no choice but to keep building on them. Look, since World War II, only a handful of places have made that lean from developing to developed. Japan, Korea, Taiwan, later China. We missed our big shot almost 30 years ago. There is no luxury of time anymore. The intent for structural change has to be irreversible, and it has to start now.
But the confidence, as it's been assessed, is that the Prime Minister can lead the unity government to do this. The challenge is huge, yes. You're talking about overcoming decades of political and economic inertia. But the opportunity, coming 3 years after a moment of total crisis, it is unprecedented. A real chance to set the tone for the next 50 years.
It is about seizing a rare moment, a moment to fundamentally reorganize the state and the economy. We've all seen the results of inaction, stagnant wages, losing out to our neighbors. We know what happens if we do nothing. So now really is the moment for that visionary action. So a question for you watching. Do you agree that success for this administration has to be measured by creating a whole new political order? Or is just winning the next election the only battle that really matters? What do you see as the single biggest barrier, political or economic objective, to making this kind of generational change happen?
That is a critical question. This has been a really insightful look at the immense mandate facing the current leadership. The stakes aren't just about the next election. They're about Malaysia's path for the next half-century.
The historical clock is definitely ticking.
Remember to like and subscribe for more videos like this.